So I want to film another example here of the back of the paper that's due tomorrow when you're talking about scale factors. So let's look at these scale factors here. The scale factor between two similar figures, not two sumo wrestlers, is given. So your scale factor is 1 to 2. Now what does that mean? That means object number 1 is, for example, a 1 by 1 by 1, and that means object number 2, and I'd always do this to help me out, is a 2 by 2 by 2, okay? So basically you're doubling it to get to the second one. It says the surface area and volume of the smaller figure is given, find the one of the larger figure, okay? All right, well, we know the scale factor, so how do we figure out what that's going to do to the volume in the area? All right, so little guy has a surface area of 90. What do I multiply that by to get big guy? Well, the scale factor, remember, however the scale factor changes, if you're doing perimeter to perimeter or length to length, you just multiply it by the scale factor once. So let's put it over here. For perimeter, it's times the scale factor 1 time. If I want to do area, now how many dimensions are changing? 2. So it's the scale factor squared to get the new area. If it's volume, I'm changing 3 dimensions, so it's the scale factor cubed. Now what the heck does that mean? Well, if I wanted to change the perimeter of my object, I would take my perimeter and just double it, right? If I want to change the area, I'm going to take the area and multiply it by my scale factor, which in this case is 2 squared. Because how many times am I changing dimensions here? Once, twice. So I have to multiply by 2 and then by 2 again. So I get 360 square yards. That's my new surface area. Let's look at volume. How many dimensions change when we're looking at volume? If I can get my thing closed here. 3 dimensions change for this guy. 3 dimensions. So I'm going to take the 216 and multiply it by, now what's happening? Whoops. I multiplied, and I probably wrote that wrong here. I multiplied that by 2 and that by 2. Now with the volume, I'm multiplying another dimension by 2. So I'm multiplying by 2 3 times, which is 2 cubed. So you do 216 times 8, which is 1,728 cubic yards. Okay? So you're trying to figure out what the scale factor is, all right? And again, you multiply by the scale factor squared to get the new area, and you multiply by the scale factor cubed to get the new volume, because you've got 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions. Okay, now let's look at one example from the end. One example from the end. Some of the missing information about the surface area has been given. Find the missing value. What's the new volume? All right? Well, if the original surface area is 1,088 and the new surface area is 425, what's your scale factor? Well, I went from 1,088, and what are we doing? We're doing area, right? So we're 2 dimension. I multiplied the surface area times my scale factor to the 2nd power, because we're changing 2 dimensions, and I got 425. So I'm going to solve this. I'm going to divide both sides by 1,088. So I've got 425 divided by 1,088. Let's see here, it didn't work. Okay. So now what I want to figure out is I end up getting k squared equals 0.625. How do I find k now? Oops, so it's not 0.625, my bad. It is 0.390 625. Now I want to square root it. So K, my scale factor is going to be 0.625, which is 625 over 100 if you want to convert it to fraction, or 5/8. So my scale factor is 8 to 5. It's 5/8. And remember, from big to small, that means I went from 8 to 5. So 5/8 is my scale factor. So how do I do that for volume? Well, for volume, what do you end up doing for volume? You don't multiply by squared, you multiply by cubed. So I'm going to take 13,312, and I'm going to multiply it by my scale factor to what power? The third power. So I have 13, because I'm going to change my dimensions 3 times, times 5 divided by 8 to the third power, and I get 3,250, and that's cubic kilometers. So the new volume would be 3,250 kilometers cubed. And that's how you use the scale factor. And that's how you find the scale factor.